Joe Burrow speaks the latest on number nine's health going into the offseason, plus lingering questions about Tee Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and their future in Cincinnati. Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien, and this is Cincinnati Bengals Talk on YouTube. Today's show, as always, presented by Big Play, and really excited to dive into a bunch of topics. We'll be joined by Andrew Fox Miller coming up in just a few minutes. You're going to hear from Joe Burrow today. You're going to hear from Jake Browning today. Both quarterbacks. Yes, both quarterbacks. And we discuss the future of a Bengals team that finished last in the AFC North and yet still won 9 games. It was the first time since the 80s that the Bengals had a winning record and failed to make the playoffs at 9-8. And the AFC North, well, it was historic. At 9-8 and in last place, that means all 4 teams finished above 500. It's the first division to do that since 1935. So the Bengals, yeah, they might have that 4th place schedule next year, but the AFC North had to set some history, make some history to do so. And part of why the Bengals didn't make the playoffs is because Joe Burrow went down and didn't play over the final 7 weeks of the season. Burrow talked earlier this week about a variety of topics, but let's start with his health. He underwent wrist surgery late November to repair a ligament that he injured against the Ravens. And, well, the season kind of went haywire from there. It certainly went into question. And the Bengals were able to pull out a 4-3 record without Joe Burrow. Not good enough for the playoffs. Here's Joe on his health, where he's at in his recovery, and when he could potentially resume throwing again.
No, we'll have to see. I think I should be good by OTAs, but we'll see. Pretty early on to really tell yet. I have about 10 to 12 weeks on everybody else starting my off season, so that kind of gives me a leg up on next year. Obviously, the throwing part will come back with time, but just as far as physically, weight room, whole body, I think I should be in a good spot.
What have you been able to do, Joe, in terms of keeping your conditioning up?
Yeah, we're lifting legs, doing a lot of core, doing the upper body where we can, tough without, being able to grab or do anything like that. But we're modifying in ways that keeps me in good physical shape, and it's just going to keep getting better as the wrist gets better too.
What's the timeline for lifting and being able to grip?
Yeah, we'll have to see. It's going to be a couple months from now.
It's going to be a couple of months from now, and that is good and bad. The good is Burrow has a couple of months. He has time to certainly recover. The bad is this was a pretty serious wrist procedure, and this was something that, let's say he's throwing by OTAs or being able to grip weights in a few months. We're talking about 4 months, 5 months. But like I said, the good news is he does have the time, and there's beauty in that, in hopefully, and this is the hope, I think, for Bengals fans everywhere, certainly Joe Burrow and those within the organization, that he can have a healthy training camp for the first time ever. And that's where I'm at. As far as OTAs go, if he's not throwing fully at OTAs, that's fine as long as everything is progressing the way it's supposed to. But when camp starts in late July, you want to get the most out of Joe Burrow. And one note that he did hint at and discuss as far as staying healthy goes in camp is not ramping up so soon. I think he's been ramping up in late June, early July, and camp is a grind and the season is a grind. And Joe Burrow staying healthy is obviously the number one priority for this team, has to be, if they're going to accomplish their goals next season, which is obviously to win a Super Bowl. Will Tee Higgins be in Cincinnati to help them win that Super Bowl? Tee Higgins was in the final year of his rookie contract. He's currently scheduled to be a free agent in March. Now, that doesn't mean that he will get to free agency. The Bengals still can place the franchise tag on him. The window to do that is late February through March 7th before free agency begins. And I think that's the most likely outcome for Tee Higgins. At the same time, the Bengals could also sign him to a contract extension. Now, Tee's dealt with multiple injuries this year, had a career low 42 catches, 656 yards, 5 touchdowns. But I think we all know how dynamic Tee Higgins is. Joe Burrow, well, he expects Tee Higgins to be back in stripes next season.
Obviously, we'd love to have T back. He's a big part of what we've done here, and it's no secret our relationship. So, I expect T to be back. I think that's the sentiment in the locker room. We all want T back. We know what kind of player he is. We know what kind of person he is. He's what being a Bengal is all about. So.
Over the past few years, when free agents have come in to potentially come here and ultimately sign here, you've been a part of that, trying to do your part. Can you have a role in guys that could potentially hit free agency like T? Is there anything there that you can get involved with, or do you just got to kind of sit on the sidelines?
T knows. I know T wants to be here. T knows that we want him here. There's not much to say on that aspect. I think everybody's expectation is that T's going to be back. So, like I said, we'll see. The offseason plays out in crazy ways that you don't really expect, but I'd love to have T back. I know he wants to be back. I know everybody in the locker room wants him back. So, like I said, we'll see. Offseason's a crazy thing. You never know how it's going to play out.
That's Joe Burrow on Tee Higgins and makes it perfectly clear. We want Tee Higgins here. I expect him here. The locker room expects him here. I will say Zach Taylor added that he couldn't imagine life without Tee Higgins on the roster. I asked Zach that on Monday after Joe's comment. So, let's welcome in Andrew Fox Miller alongside James Rapien here on Enter the Jungle. Andrew, your reaction hearing that, knowing how the Bengals operate from afar, up close, all of those things. Are you uneasy about Tee Higgins' future? Does that give you some assurance? What's going through your head?
Honestly, I don't even know what assurance I want at this point. I'm kind of on the fence with the whole Tee Higgins offseason saga that we're entering here right now. But for what Burrow said, we've said it time and time again. Burrow doesn't just say things to say things. We could say calculated, deliberate. That was feeding some very deliberate information on what the expectation is for T. Maybe there's more to it than that, but that's how I read it.
Expectation for T. Interesting. I read it as this is my expectation for the franchise. And I want T back. The franchise still has control to bring T back, regardless of what he wants. T should be back. And he was also asked contract-wise how he set up his contract. And I know a lot of people from afar look at Joe's numbers and say, man, he didn't take a discount. Well, he was never going to take a discount. He took a market deal, as he should have. It was deserved. But he did say that as he was having discussions with the Bengals about his extension, Tee Higgins' future, Jamar Chase, the future of these guys was discussed in that. And he didn't get into details, didn't lay out the plan, all of those things. But I really think that this is the first challenge, the first test. He did leave the door open. You never know what's going to happen. But the first test for this Bengals franchise, everyone knew you were extending Joe Burrow. Now can you keep the band together? And the other part of this, do you want to keep Tee Higgins alongside Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow long-term? Not for just this year, but long-term, given his injury history and given how you would have to structure your team around that trio.
Yeah, and I think you look at the trio current state right now, we need consistency. And let's be honest, T injury-wise, especially, there's been a lack of consistency that we can depend on from this past season. Are we willing to pay him? And I know it's a larger discussion, a larger question that we can have on a future episode, but are we willing to pay him, close to, if not wide receiver one money, if that's what he commands?
I'll give you the money.
Yeah.
You want the money? I think it would be like 4 years, $90 million.
Jamar is going to set the market, just like Joe did.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they don't have room for it or can't make it work, but do we want Tee Higgins? And listen, we talk about consistency. There's a lot to be seen from these young players. We didn't see as much as I would have liked this past season. Even in week 18, it was nice to see Yosavash and Charlie Jones a little bit more. It's tough. And Burrow said what he said. And let me ask you one quick question about that, because you brought up a good point about challenging the front office, challenging the organization. You, as members of media, you request people to come to that podium if you have the opportunity to do so. And that's what happened with Joe Burrow. And he obliged.
Yeah.
To your point, if we're working under that theory, did he agree to it knowing he had the opportunity to do just that as far as his message on Tee Higgins?
Sure. I'm sure that there was. You don't say what you say there without wanting to send a message one way or the other. And it might just be a message to the public, to be clear. It doesn't mean it's a message to the front office or a message to T. It might not. But he said it multiple times, expects T back. I expect T back. And I expect T back too. Now, whether or not that's the right decision, whether or not they should pay him long term, we can do a deep dive into that because that is the question of the offseason. And we will do that on a future episode and certainly on Cincinnati Bengals Talk all offseason long. There's plenty of time for that. But there's also another wide receiver that's set to hit free agency for the first time in his career. A man that has 513 career receptions in 8 seasons with the Bengals, Tyler Boyd, might have played his last game in a Bengals uniform. Thoughts on Boyd, plus what Jake Browning had to say about the veteran receiver. That's next on Enter the Jungle. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien alongside Andrew Fox Miller and Tyler Boyd. 513 career receptions, 6,000 yards. Was the 53rd overall pick in the 2016 NFL draft by the Bengals and has given the Bengals 8 seasons of awesomeness. I mean, I give Tyler Boyd a lot of credit. And from day one of me being in the Bengals locker room on a daily basis, Tyler always gave me time, was always good to me, always talked to me about what was on his mind, from when he was a healthy scratch in the Marvin Lewis era in year 2 to when he was the number 1 option in 2018 when AJ Green went down, a number 1 option at certain times in this offense. And now I got to be honest, it feels like the Tyler Boyd era is coming to an end. A really cool moment in the Bengals locker room on Sunday after they beat the Browns in the season finale. Jake Browning interrupting Tyler Boyd's interview post-game and saying how much Boyd means to the locker room and to the roster.
Hey, real quick. Been my locker mate the whole year. Been a big part of helping me bounce back when I throw 3 picks in a game. And I think an underrated part of the whole locker room. And the receiver room, obviously we got a ton of talent there, but a big unsung hero of the locker room. And I hope he's back, but wherever he goes, someone's going to be lucky to have him in the locker room.
Love, bro. Love. Straight love. I mean, it just shows the respect, man. I done been here a while, and I always been that same person each and every day walking here. Whether I had a terrible game, a good game, or a game where I didn't have any looks. I always been that guy to help support guys and just always been true to myself. I'm an authentic guy, and I'm always be that person, because when times get rough, that's when guys show their true colors. And I'm always keep my true colors under the lights, whether the lights is on or off.
I love that because he's played by that. And he's had key drops. Everyone's going to remember the Houston one this year. It didn't play the greatest in Super Bowl 56. And the fact that he bounces back from those moments, and he certainly has, and made big plays. I love that he encourages his teammates as well, because Jake Browning was awful against the Steelers in both games. And the fact that Tyler, who, and Jake said this, obviously Tyler's from Pittsburgh. His family was in the stands. It's at Pittsburgh, and Jake plays the way he did, and Tyler's the first one to pick him up. I think that it stinks that that's going, but that's how I hope a lot of people remember Tyler Boyd, because I agree. And I've shared some of the similar experiences where he does bounce back or respond the right way to adversity when things aren't going well.
Yeah, I mean, his history of consistency, reliability on this team, and you look at the bigger picture, it feels a bit odd, James. I feel like you're eulogizing him a bit. We don't know for sure what he's going to do or what's going to happen.
I don't think he's going to be back. That's why I'm doing it.
Unfortunately, I don't either. Even if he stays on the roster, we talk about Tee Higgins. Still don't have an answer at wide receiver 2 if Tee Higgins isn't here. So there's a whole slew of questions we could have whether or not we keep Tyler Boyd. But I mentioned you kind of eulogizing it. We just played that clip of Joe Burrow. Expectation, Tee Higgins is going to be here. Asked the same or similar question about Tyler Boyd towards the end of that news conference. He didn't say quite that. We could read into it if we want. He basically just said, love TB. I've known him since I was obviously brought into this organization. Sort of wish him the best sentiment. Yep.
And I think it's because he knows the writing's on the wall. He's probably going to try to get one last deal of, 2 years, $8 million per, something like that. And the Bengals will not go there. I would be stunned. Now, if he tests the market and comes back and his market's just like a 1 year, $4 million deal. Like, could I see the path? Maybe, because at this time last year, I didn't think Jermaine Pratt would be back, and he's back. And so never say never, but I do think it's unlikely. And it's not necessarily a Boyd thing. It's just a matter of addressing what they need to address and the weaknesses that they have on this team, or the guys that they do need to pay that are entering their prime and not out of their prime. And obviously Tyler, it's wild because I'm a few years older than him, but age 30, that is 8 years into the league. That's usually when wide receivers start to decline. So we will see, but I think with Charlie Jones, Andre Yosavash, you have the replacements in-house. The Bengals have a lot of questions, though, and it's not just at wide receiver, as we've spent a lot of time on Tee Higgins and on Tyler Boyd. Let's get to two veterans that contracts, they're up. One says he wants to be back, and one stops well short of saying he wants to return next season. That's next, right here on Enter the Jungle. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien alongside Andrew Fox Miller, DJ Reader, and Jonah Williams. Both trench players, both free agents to be, and both, well, could be back. One makes it clear that he's hoping to be back. Here's DJ Reader earlier this week.
I hope so. It's always good to be wanted. I hope so. But, I don't really control those type of things, and I don't spend my time worrying about them too much. There's always uncertainty in your mind, but I find peace in knowing that, I'll be exactly where God wants me to be.
So you hope to be back?
Yeah, I hope so.
Makes it clear. I had to make sure. Hey, so you hope to be back, DJ? So you hope to be back. I have a question for you in just 1 second, Andrew, but before I ask you about DJ Reader and Jonah Williams, let's hear from Jonah Williams, because I asked him about his future and if he expects to be back next season. Are you hoping to be back next season?
It's very soon to say, and like you said, it is after the last game, but it's still, we're only a couple hours after the last game, so I haven't had a ton of time to think about it.
You positioned yourself to be maybe the top available free agent offensive lineman this year, which is a pretty good place to be. Are you excited about the process and the months to come?
I am. I'm like I said, I'm a small picture guy. It's hard for me to think about things like that. I like to focus on the small stuff and, kind of let the chips fall as they may. I've taken the season day by day, and that's also how I'm going to take the offseason, however it plays out.
That's Jonah Williams, who certainly stopped short of saying he wants to be back in Cincinnati. Also added that he's willing to play left tackle or right tackle. He'll work out at both spots ahead of free agency. All right, so Jonah stopped short of wanting to be back. DJ Reader says he wants to be back in Cincinnati, but also says, or is also dealing and rehabbing from a torn quad tendon, which is a very serious injury. He's recovered from it once before, but might not be ready for the start of the 2024 season. Andrew, if you could pick one, who would you pick to re-sign this offseason?
I'm going to say Jonah Williams. And I want DJ Reader here bad. Don't get me wrong.
Wow.
But I'm thinking about what you just mentioned there, which is I would love to have DJ Reader. I don't know who the answer to the successor to DJ Reader would be yet. We haven't seen it on this roster. It may have to be free agency. It may have to be in the draft. I'm not comfortable with it either way. But when you talk about Jonah Williams, solid at right tackle, delivered, did what was asked of him. But if there's an injury on that offensive line, he could just switch to left as well as needed. Like, that is hard to find in this league right now. Who's going to replace Jonah Williams? I could ask the same about DJ Reader, but it's a harder question to answer when you ask who is going to replace Jonah Williams right now. It's the hand that we're being dealt if you're looking at this organization in this position group.
I think twofold. One, DJ Reader is more important because they have nothing there. They have nothing, like
That's
absolutely nothing. And it depends on the money. Jonah Williams may make $20 million per year this year. Sure. He might. And so I say DJ because I just assume that they're going to have one offensive line hole in that starting lineup that they'll have to address. But would I blame them if they were able to keep Jonah Williams? I wouldn't blame them. And we'll see what they do this offseason. That is one of the many dilemmas. There's a theme of this show. Bengals offseason dilemmas and storylines, and we will be covering it all season long. But up next, let's look back at the 2023 campaign. It did just end. Our favorite moments from 2023. I'll get Andrew's and I will share mine next on Enter the Jungle. Wrapping things up here on Enter the Jungle, Andrew, the 2023 season is in the books. The Bengals finished 9-8. What was your favorite moment from this year?
Oof. I don't know so much moment, but when I look back at the season, you've referred to it as the year that Joe Burrow got injured, but for me, it's the year that Jake Browning emerged. There's a backup quarterback that proved something this season, which was, maybe people forget, I'm sure they don't, but to the degree of which the conversation was being had of what is the answer behind Joe Burrow. It was a question a lot of people were asking this offseason, going into training camp, even into the preseason. And we've got a much better answer we possibly could have imagined. Jake Browning, if his number gets called again, I'm pretty confident that they can easily win with him.
It's fair. That's certainly one of the offseason needs that was filled. He will be back next year on a essentially league minimum deal, which is great news for the Bengals. My favorite moment, pretty simple. Going to San Francisco, beating what the team I think is probably the favorite to win the Super Bowl, and doing it the way they did in dominant fashion, and reminding everyone that the Bengals are legitimate contenders. I think, and Burrow said it this week, they never reached their full potential, and they didn't. But that was the closest they got to it this year. Burrow was on, the defense was playing well, and a reminder that this Bengals team, as far away as it feels that they are from being a legitimate contender, I don't think they're as far off as some believe. This has been Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Fox Miller. I'm James Rapien. Make sure you check us out on Cincinnati Bengals Talk on YouTube. And until next time, for Big Play, as always, thanks to Big Play and the Big Play Network. This has been Enter the Jungle, and it's been a lot of fun. Episode 3 in the books. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.